All right, hi everybody. John Meadows and Eugene Teo here with you. We just finished training legs and we recorded it, but that's not enough quality content for you, so we had to do more. So this is 7 rapid fire questions with Eugene and John. So question number 1 is ways to improve day-to-day stress to improve training capacity recovery. So I think the question is, how do you manage stress to improve your training capacity?
Right. So, do you want me to go first with this?
You go first.
Couple of ways that I would look at doing this, and it's first of all is there's always going to be noise in day-to-day life. You're always going to have family stress, work stress, financial stress, and the reality is a lot of it we can't really manage that easily. Like, you can't necessarily handle your boss not being a good person to you or your financial pressures. But what you can manage that we have most control over is our training in the gym. So that's where I personally am very, very big on going into the gym with a plan. Saying, like, I'm going to be hitting this exercise like a deadlift or a squat or a leg press. I'm going to be shooting for a certain number of reps or weight or quality, whatever it is I'm going for. And I want to hit that. I want to hit that target. I'm quite happy. Okay, I've done that. I'm gonna intentionally not overshoot just to chase after more and more and more fatigue. The mistake I made in my early 20s was I would just smash myself into the ground over and over and over again, trying to chase that fatigue. And you have great workouts. You leave the gym feeling like, I've done a really, really hard job, well done. But very rapidly, I started to accrue a lot of extra stress that I couldn't recover from.
And that was in part, you think, due to the outside environment that you couldn't control?
Yeah, for sure. So I think what we can control immediately is making sure that we still push hard in the gym, still train hard, but manage how hard or how much of that we're doing. Because it can be quite addictive to always just train hard all the time and always like push beyond that failure point. I'd rather say push hard, hit your requirements, hit whatever you've planned out for the day as your challenging work, your quality reps, and then leave it. Because there's always more you can do tomorrow. There's no amount of work you can do today that's going to outweigh what you can do across a week or across a month or across a year. So I pace myself to optimize that day-to-day recovery.
Yeah, and that's the analogy. This is a marathon, not a sprint. The one tip I would say is disengage. Learn how to disengage from the day-to-day stress, like not letting it get to you. Whatever the social or emotional type situations that you're in that are tough, try to just disengage. Don't sit around and think about it over and over and over. Just get really good at disengaging and not taking things personal. I think that's a very simple thing to keep in mind. So the second question is belt versus no belt.
Great. So I get asked that all the time, and there's a couple of different ways you can look at it. It can be a very, very simple answer of you weren't born with a belt, so why are you wearing a belt when you train? And I do believe a lot of people need to learn how to create that intra-abdominal pressure on their own, and they're sort of using the belt more so as a band-aid to give them a false sense of security, as opposed to learning how to use it properly from maybe a powerlifting or intra-abdominal pressure perspective. So I believe in that context, they shouldn't be wearing it until they learn how to use it and how to create their own internal belt. Once you've done that and you know how to do that, then for sure you can add a belt on, because it will help creating even more intra-abdominal pressure that will then help with heavier loads lifted. If that is part of your goal, to be lifting as much weight as possible, which definitely isn't everybody's goal.
Yeah, so I tend to see the injury prevention part of it a lot, probably just being older and having suffered from some back stresses that were quite painful. What I do like for people to do, though, is not wear a belt until they really need it. So if you're doing, say, 5 sets on a deadlift, then there's no sense in wearing it on all 5 sets. Like, use it, don't use it until you really need it on a heavy set, which is when you would normally get injured. So I would say just use it strategically. A lot of people wear it with the thought that if you're wearing it all the time, it'll keep your waist tighter. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. It can remind you to stay tight if it's cinched up real tight. I personally have a hard time breathing if I do that, but so I like to not wear it until I need it, and then I would use it on exercises that I think might be a little more dangerous in my lower back just to stay safe. Okay, next question. Does diaphragmatic pressure give you bigger weights? So can you train heavier using breathing through your diaphragm is how I would interpret that question.
Right, so I think it's either bigger weights or bigger waist is what the question might be there. So well, we can answer both. We can answer both here and say, okay, increasing the amount of diaphragmatic pressure you can create by breathing in will help you create that intra-abdominal pressure, which will help you lift bigger weights for sure. Will that lead to a bigger waist over time, like blowing out your midsection? It's anecdotal there. Because you see a lot of strongmen, a lot of power lifters, and they're quite lean, but they have a very thick core, a thick waist. But at the same time, you look through a lot of the old school bodybuilders through the 30s up to the 70s, not even like just the 70s onwards, they were doing a lot of diaphragmatic training. So if you remember Pumping Iron, this glosses over a lot of people's eyes when they're watching it. You see Franco Columbu up on stage blowing up the hot water balloon.
Yeah, right.
Right? People think, oh, it's just a circus act, which it kind of was back then. It was more of a vaudeville kind of show. But that is part of diaphragmatic and respiratory muscle training, like being able to have that kind of strength. That was quite a popular thing through the early, like 20, 30, 40s, through strongman training. And they weren't getting blown out waists. They were using it to train their respiratory muscles to then help them with training up their vacuum. So you got a little bit of both. I think that diaphragmatic pressure or diaphragmatic training in and of itself is not going to cause a bigger waistline, but it depends how you're going about doing it. And are you training, say, both extremes of the range of motion, of blowing it out and sucking it in? And that's where maybe the strong men, they're pushing it out, not pulling it in. And then the old timers were pulling it in as well. So they were getting maybe both benefits. But that's part of my bro science anecdotal evidence to it. I don't think there's anything directly showing that diaphragmatic pressure will blow out your waist or that it won't.
Right. Yeah, it's just the best guess. When I was powerlifting, one of the keys was always, as you mentioned, was, expand, push your belly against the belt. And it did always make me nervous. Like, okay, if I'm stretching out all that tissue, am I gonna stretch the balloon out? Is it gonna be bigger? In particular, when we're being told to shove down food all the time, I just always had this thing in my head which was I was really scared it would get. So to this day, I don't blow out against the belt. I don't suck in, but I just kind of keep neutral and try to stay tight. I don't know if I'm doing it right or wrong. That's just always what went through my head. Okay. The number 4, the importance of proper execution on warm-up sets. In this one, I think there's a couple things in mind. There's the obvious, like blood flow and things like that for injury prevention. I think the other key is simply establishing mind-muscle connection. So when you're doing your warm-up sets and you're leading up to your bigger sets, you want to get the right muscles working in the right way, get the right stuff firing. So to me, the warm-up sets, they are, as the name implies, warm up your joints, warm up your muscles. But it's also to just establish that mind to muscle connection so your brain is sending signals to the right place, the right muscle fibers are firing. So I do think that warm-up sets are very important. I think probably what we see a lot of is people actually doing too many warm-up sets. I need a lot of them to get my joints warm, but there's no reason why a guy 22 years old should need 8 warm-up sets on something. I might need 8, but anyways, that's my thought on that.
For sure. I think about it as perfect practice makes perfect. So I'm very, very specific on how I'll warm up in terms of the execution of the exercise. I don't necessarily mind about how many sets I'm doing as a warm-up. I do as many as I need to, but I don't like to go heavier in terms of incrementing the weight up until I feel like I've executed that first set perfectly. It felt good on my joints, it felt good on my muscles, the weight moved really, really well. Then it's okay, I've earned the right to go heavier. Now, on any random day, maybe I'll feel stiffer one day because I slept funny, I was on traveling. So in that case, I might say, I don't feel good after that one set. I'm going to do 2 or 3 more until I've earned that right to go heavier. My goal is to, by the time I get to that working weight, it's such a rehearsed pattern, my body automatically knows how to execute it perfectly with a lot less focus. So I can think more about just lifting that weight, and it's going to be safe. So I try to do that practice on the warm-up set, so it just carries over to the top set.
Yeah, and you know that's a very good point. You know what's interesting about that too is like you can take an exercise that you haven't done in a long time, and I think some people have this belief that if you haven't done an exercise in say 2 months, that you've got to train it again for weeks and weeks and weeks to establish the proper bar path, establish all that stuff. But I don't think so. I think in a workout or two, if you're doing the warm-ups right, I think you can just comes right back. I would like to think, I haven't squatted heavy in a while, but I would like to think if I get under the squat rack today and try some squats, I would like to think that I can get the form back pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Considering I've been doing them for 30 years.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
Okay, I like that. Earn the right to move up in the weight. I like that. Training with a bad mood. Well, we don't know because we're never in a bad mood. We're always happy. I would say training with rage. Our friend Hakan likes to use the word rage. Training with it's interesting. I have this thought in my head that okay, so when you get rage and you get angry, you create more adrenaline. Your adrenal glands produce more adrenaline, and that makes you a little stronger. But like, how many sets can you realistically do that during a workout? Can you get, if you're doing 15 sets for legs, can you get rage on all 15 sets? Probably not. You're probably gonna, so I think the way to like channel a bad mood for the positive or rage is to like save it for your 1 or 2 really toughest sets for the day and then kind of go berserk. But even after the crazy rage and berserk set, I like to just calm down and just bring everything back down. And people ask me sometimes like, how are you so calm and just joke around between your sets, implying that I'm not focused. No, I'm actually very focused. I'm just bringing everything back down, calming down. And then when I need to bring the energy back, I can turn it back on. So just my thought.
Yeah, I think there's 2 ways I can answer this. First of all, it's so addictive or addicting, I don't know what the proper English is there. Let's say it's addicting, let's pretend that's a word, to train in rage, like in that mindset. And I think you're gonna have some very good workouts when you get angry like that and just headbutt the barbell and rip it off the ground. But I always tell people you are doing a deal with the devil there. And it's going to give you a lot of success until it doesn't, because it's extremely hard. And I can speak from this more from a power lifter's perspective, because you'll see them lifting on the platform, they seem quite aggressive, but it is very, very, very challenging to maintain your perfect technique when you're angry like that, because you just start to see red. And it's a matter of time before that little indiscretion in technique becomes a bigger indiscretion in technique and becomes an even bigger one, and that can then maybe put you at an injury risk, or it may even start shifting tension away from what you're trying to work. Like for me personally, I find that my quads activate or work in like a leg press very, very, very easily. My glutes take a little bit longer in terms of how much I focus or position my feet or think about the correct execution to make sure they're doing the right thing. So if I get angry and just say I'm going to lift this weight up, I'll lift double what I normally would, but it'll all go to my quads, all go primarily to my right quad and not my left quad, because of my own little bias. Now that's not the same for everybody. Some people can get away with that, but that's for me many years ago, probably 1 too many sessions training on that nerve of extreme rage and anger to trying to get through something quite scary in the gym. So I think that's really important. I think the other part to answer this training with a bad mood may also be, like you said, if you're in a bad mood in general, should you go to the gym? And this is where I always, even now, I always try to make my training very, very emotionless. I try to, like you said before, I try to separate myself. Say, here I am to train, I'm here to do a job, I'm here to lift a certain weight with a certain technique, a certain amount of times. I try not to let the outside life play into that. If I focus just on what I have to do in the gym and not let my mood, whether positive or negative, influence it, and just focus on the task at hand, then training becomes a lot more productive. And when it does become productive like that, I tend to feel a lot better. My mood improves just from that alone, by focusing on the goal of the training session.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people just the endorphins and just the blood flow actually makes them feel better too. So, okay, number 6 out of 7. Would you focus more on your range of motion or on your mind-muscle connection?
Right. I think in the pursuit of trying to do exercises correctly, with let's say a squat, using a full range where your ass touches your ankles or ass touches the grass, hamstrings covering calves, the pursuit of that perfection has led to people going beyond what they can actually control and handle. So I tell people, just because you can go somewhere physically doesn't mean you should go somewhere necessarily. Right. I do bring it back to where can you maintain some sort of mind-muscle connection, some sort of control, some sort of tension within your muscles, as opposed to it shifting over onto connective tissues. Because you could easily sit in the bottom of a squat with your hamstrings covering your calves, but there's a good chance your spine will be rounded, your butt will be curled all the way under into that butt wink, and now yes, you are loading tissue still, you are loading muscle as well, but you're loading connective tissues as well, which may not be part of the goal there, especially if the goal is to load muscle to stimulate that for growth. So I'm very, very happy with telling people to do a half squat or a quarter squat or half range on a bench press. And I'll even set the pins up in a rack to restrict range of motion to where they're comfortable and confident with and where they have strength in. Now, I don't think you should stay there. I think over time, if you can, you should try to get that bar lower and lower. Yeah. But I don't want people using the weight to force them into a deeper range. Stay where you can control and it will improve over time.
Yeah, I think when I read this question, the first thing I thought about was a preacher curl. Like, can I go 4 range of motion? Yes, absolutely. But is it the smartest thing to do when you walk into a gym, to do a full range of motion preacher curl? Like, that's a pretty risky exercise to just walk in here and do. So, yeah, I like what you're saying. It's establish the right range of motion so you can achieve a good mind-muscle connection. Because if you're in a range that doesn't allow for the right mind-muscle connection, then you've already kind of lost. So, okay, good one. Last one, number 7. Top 3 tips to stay on track regarding your food prep. So what are some tips that can help you successfully prep your food?
Right. I don't know if I have a top 3 now, so I'm going to completely butcher that answer. But I can give you some general guidelines on what I try to do with people. Is the first thing I set with them is the expectation of telling them that, you know what, you're not going to be able to prep all your food all the time. Life is going to happen. If you set yourself up and say, I'm going to prep my 6 meals a day or my 4 meals a day, it's going to be perfect every single time. I'm going to do it on Sunday and Thursday, all the typical things you hear about. What happens when life happens? And what happens when there's one little hiccup in your perfectly laid out twice a week meal prep plan, and all of a sudden you can't prep for that day? Now the next 3 days are written off. Yep. More importantly for me is I tell people, you're going to mess it up. You're going to have life happening every single week, so expect it to, anticipate it to. So instead, learn, and this is more of a long-term educational process, learn how to be able to eat on the fly. Learn how to be able to not necessarily eat instinctively, but how to know, okay, I've got no food with me right now. How can I make substitutions from something from the grocery store I can pick up just on the way home? How can I go to a cafe and grab something that's close enough to what I need to be eating? It won't be perfect, but how can I make that substitution? More of the, I guess, if it fits your macros approach. Right. Which I think is actually very, very beneficial. I think it's a good skill everybody should have, to learn how to track their macros and learn what a portion is beyond just a chicken breast, broccoli, sweet potato. They should know how to substitute and learn how to live freely, because life will happen. And that way, when life does happen, you don't freak out because you didn't prep your food, but you know how to then navigate the grocery store, a cafe, a restaurant, whatever it is, and eat within what you're aiming for and still make progress. Yeah. As soon as I started coming to terms with that, I made a lot more progress with my physique. Yeah. Because I wasn't so caught up with the minutia. I was able to have a life outside of just food prep and bodybuilding, and I was a lot happier. And whenever life did happen, I knew how to get over it. I knew how to work around it.
Yeah. It's funny when you're talking about when things happen. So one of the things that people have the benefit of doing now is using a food prep company. Like, there was no such thing as food prep companies for bodybuilding back 10 years ago. So you can have somebody else prep your food, and this becomes very easy. So you made me think about a situation. I was traveling to compete, actually when I got my pro card. So I have all the food sent to my hotel, but I only take a meal or two with me. So I had a flight canceled and delayed, so I had to sit in the airport, and my one meal that I had with me wasn't enough. So I had to think, okay, what was the meal? What was the macros? The only thing open in the area was a bagel shop and a Johnny Rockets, which is like a milkshake and hamburger place. So I knew what my meal was. It was actually some lean red meat, and I think it was a little bit of rice. So what I did was I got like a couple. They actually started serving breakfast. So I sat down. And I thought, okay, I think this is going to equate to like 3 whole eggs. My calories are going to be a little bit higher from the fat, so I'm going to have to bring my calories down somewhere else. So then I had to make me some like hash browns kinda, and I didn't let them use any oil. But to your point, the macro thing is it's actually really important, because you don't have to eat. It doesn't have to be 6 ounces of chicken. Like, it doesn't have to be that food. So I agree with you. The ability to just understand macros. When people travel a lot, I tell them now, take some nuts, take some rice cakes. Just take things that are simple and match your macros. So I think probably the best thing advice we can give you here is understand macros and replacing foods. And again, I think you can use meal prep services if you're lucky enough to be able to do that. Okay, that's 7 questions with Eugene and John. I hope you enjoyed them. We will see you next time.